how we came to this is actually really a miracle as well. But I'll tell you guys a little bit later on how we found the foundation. But it's one of those things that it's like you never planned for, but you just did. The other thing I want to share with you is about. Well, let me go through the initiative really quickly. Right? So what would the initiative do is it will increase the penalty for human trafficking, increase the fine for human traffickers, up to $1.5 million, which would go into victim services. It would remove the need to show force when a child is involved. What's really ridiculous right now is in California's law is that you still have to prove that a child was forced in the situation of being sold. And if you have children in your life, you know you don't need a lot of force to convince them to do things, especially if they have a life of abuse already. And then also to mandate that law enforcement be trained on how to protect and how to recognize these victims. To make sex traffickers register as sex offenders, to require that all sex offenders be disclose their internet accounts. The police that was on our video, Chappie Hunter, he spent about 7 years right now really just focused on the sex trafficking on minors, domestic minors in San Diego, and he told me that he's never had a case that did not involve the internet, social media, in either initiating the relationship or perpetuating the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. And that's how important it is that our laws reflect the modern life that we have. And to also prohibit the use of the victim's history to impeach the character or to weaken the case. And this is a story that recently was in the news, July 29, 2011, where a pimp got away because the defense lawyer was able to portray the victim, who was 17 years old at the time, as that they call it that the sexual exploitation was her lifestyle. Because she was a slut before, so that's why her exploitation was just a perpetuation of her lifestyle. And they actually acquitted him because of that. And this is how awful our laws is in this country in protecting it, and protecting our own people about it. And one of the things I'm so passionate about taking it to the people of California and involving California is this whole fact that we as activists are in a small community. And our activism has to move into a movement. It has to become a movement for us to really have the impact. And I put together this slide because I went to a conference that was put together, that they spent about a year and a half to put together. And they had about actually less than 2,000 people there. And what I realized is it was such a successful conference, but then what I also realized is that if we had one of those conferences every day for 23 years, without anybody overlapping it, right? That would reach about the same amount of people we could reach with one initiative on one day in this state. And this is how awesome California is, because it's so big that we have all these people involved. And that's where we need to go. We have to make, just like we had to go with domestic violence, a day rape, and all of these things where we have to really go from something that is just a small group of people who really care about the issue and know about the issue, to really a movement, moving the people together into this. Okay, great. So in prior to this, because I actually have something that I want to share with you and I want to have time. In order to get this on the ballot, we had to collect signatures, because the initiative process is basically citizens saying, we are going to change the laws ourselves. And only, not every state has that constitutional right for their state citizens, but California is one of those unique ones. And we allow citizens to change the law by passing our legislatures, who right now doesn't have human trafficking as their focus, even though they tell you it is. But I can tell you after 2 years of lobbying that it isn't. And what we're doing is to collect signatures starting next week, we need to collect 750,000 signatures, which is a humongous amount of signatures to collect, and we have to do that by April, and that's why we need everybody to help to do that. So let me go back to the story of why I don't cry anymore. I don't cry anymore because I've seen the other side of change. And I've heard stories of Carissa, a story of T, who is a girl in Oakland. She grew up in Oakland and was basically abused all her life. But last month, T shared the stage in New York City in Carnegie Hall with J-Lo, with Laura Bush, and the Bush twins, with shared the honor with people like Congresswoman Giffords. And she was honored as Glamour Woman of the Year. And she was there with other, who's who and what's what. And she's 22 years old right now. But for 17 years of her life, she was abused and trafficked. But God is great and He does miracles. And she remains a powerful voice in Oakland for children. Human trafficking is a brutal human rights violation and abuse. These stories make me mad and indignant. But now what they do is, when I read these stories, I see the potential of these victims. I see T, I see Carissa, and I see the potential that they don't have to end up like Sarah, and they don't have to end up like Bridget, if we can step in early enough. The Oakland police told me that every single one of these what you call prostitutes on the streets who are adults, they didn't start there when they were 18 years old. They started there when they were 14, when they were 15 years old, or even younger. But it is possible to prevent human trafficking from happening and victimizing the next child, the next woman, and the next man. And the IJM did a study International Justice Mission they do work overseas, and they partner up with the Gates Foundation. And they did a study in Cebu in Philippines. I think it's the second largest city in the Philippines. And they did a study and said, what would happen if we train law enforcement to enforce the laws that they currently have against human trafficking and against people who exploit children like that. So they did that, and they did a study before and after, and it was a 4-year study. And what they found was that they found a 79% decrease in children who are being sold for sex in that area over the 4-year period of what happened. When perpetrators know that they have to pay for their crime, when victims know that there's a way out and that there are people caring for them, that there's hope at the other side, things can change. It can change. Human trafficking is a human rights atrocity, but it's possible to stop it. It's possible to make a difference. These children are our children, and they don't live in Thailand, they don't live in the Philippines, they live here, they live in Oakland, they live in San Diego, they live in San Francisco. Bridget actually was trafficked in Sacramento, but in San Francisco as well. I mean, all of them. She basically she covered every single part of this West Coast in the 17 years that she was trafficked. And it touches every single part of our country, and we just don't know it. We just have to open our eyes to it. They are children in our community, they're shopping in our shopping malls, they go to our schools, they might be in your kids' classrooms. And you don't even know it. And they may even be part of your family, like Vicky's family. Vicky lives in a very nice part of Eldorado Hills, you guys know Sacramento area. That's an upper middle class neighborhood. And yet they happen to our family. Victims are fearful, the parents are fearful. So we have to make the perpetrators fearful as well for what they're doing. And that's why California Against Slavery, we're not about vengeance, we're about prevention. We're about justice. We're about being the light and really highlighting that this is a serious crime. We have a population in our own neighborhoods that's vulnerable to this crime and this human rights abuse and brutality and torture. And we need to do something about it. And why our laws are so weak is because our citizens haven't voiced. We haven't stood up and say, this is a stop. We got to stop here. This is it. And this is our chance. The California Against Slavery, California Against Sexual Exploitation Act is really our chance as citizens, as residents of this state, to say that's it. We're done with this. We're done with this human rights abuse. We're done with this torture. We're done with this exploitation. And we're done with this violation and robbery of the innocence and the soul of our children and our women. And that's what we're here